The scoreboard showed he'd won the point. The replay on the stadium screen showed something else. His foot had touched the net, a clear violation. The kind every player on tour knows the moment it happens. Because you feel it, even through the shoe, even in the middle of a match. The referee hadn't seen it. The crowd had. The cameras had. And Milos Raonic, standing there, racket in hand, expression unreadable, said nothing. He took the point. Now here's what that moment tells you. Not about his ethics, but about the man himself. Because Milos Raonic didn't build his career on passion, he built it on calculation. And in that fraction of a second, on a court in Montreal, the calculation was simple. The referee didn't call it. That's the rule. Take the point. Most people watching that replay felt something uncomfortable. The question is, what exactly was it? Was it outrage? Or was it recognition? He was never supposed to look like a tennis player. 6'5", 216 pounds. The kind of frame that gets recruited for basketball, for rowing, for anything that rewards leverage and mass. Tennis, a sport built on touch, on economy of motion, on the ability to redirect a ball traveling 100 miles an hour with a flick of the wrist. Tennis wasn't designed for bodies like his. But Milos Raonic didn't see a body. He saw a machine. And machines don't have limitations. They have inefficiencies waiting to be engineered out. His parents had fled Yugoslavia when he was 3 years old, landing in Canada with engineering degrees, and the particular kind of discipline that comes from building a life twice. His father held a doctorate in electrical engineering. His mother, a degree in mechanical engineering. In that household, emotion without logic wasn't passion, it was noise. Problems existed to be solved. Feelings existed to be managed. And tennis, when the young Raonic picked up a racket, was simply another system to be understood. He didn't fall in love with the sport, he studied it. He saw angles, percentages, optimal contact points. He understood, before most of his peers, that a serve hit at the right trajectory, not just hard, but precisely placed, was mathematically very difficult to return. Not impossible, difficult. And in tennis, difficult is enough. Before he turned professional, he had been accepted to study finance at a university in the United States. He considered it seriously. The numbers made sense there, too. But tennis offered a different kind of equation. One with a global leaderboard, verifiable results, and a clear answer to the question he was really asking. How good can I become if I apply everything I have? He chose tennis, not out of love, out of ambition. And for a long time, a very long time, the calculation worked. By his mid-20s, Raonic's serve was among the most statistically dominant weapons in the history of professional tennis. He won 91% of his service games, a figure that places him third all-time in the ATP's recorded era. His first serve regularly traveled at over 140 miles per hour. His second serve, the one players traditionally treat as a vulnerability, averaged over 100. Opponents who had spent years reading the tells of the world's best servers described his delivery as almost unreadable. The ball seemed to accelerate off the strings rather than decelerate, a product of his height, his shoulder rotation, and thousands of hours of deliberate mechanical refinement. He reached the top 3 in the world, the first Canadian man ever to do so. He reached the final at Wimbledon, the first Canadian man ever to do so. He beat Roger Federer in 5 sets to get there, a match that lasted over 3 hours on center court, in which Raonic served with such precision and weight that Federer, who had been deconstructing opponents' serves for 2 decades, could not consistently find a solution. By any reasonable measure, the calculation had produced the correct result, But numbers have a way of hiding what they can't quantify. What the statistics didn't show was that his body had been negotiating a separate agreement with his ambition, one written in a language his engineering mind kept refusing to read. A hip surgery at 20. Ankle damage the following year. A nerve condition in his foot so severe that the pain radiated upward through his ankle, his knee, his hip, redistributing load across joints that weren't designed to carry it. His body wasn't breaking down randomly. It was compensating, systematically, intelligently, and fatally, for every adjustment he made to preserve the serve. The machine was optimizing itself toward collapse. And here is where the story turns. Not dramatically, not with a single injury or a single loss, but with a question that Raonic himself seemed unwilling to ask out loud. What happens when the equation stops working and there's nothing underneath it? In 2021, the Achilles tendon in his right leg stopped functioning. Not a rupture, something slower and harder to fix. Chronic degeneration. The kind of damage that accumulates over years of loading a tendon beyond its recovery capacity, until one day it simply refuses. There was no surgery that could reset the clock. There was only time and the brutal arithmetic of rehabilitation. For 14 months, Milos Raonic could not touch a tennis ball. He sat in Monaco with his wife and confronted, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, a version of himself that had no match to prepare for. No serve to refine, no ranking to protect, no calculation to run. And in that absence, in that enforced stillness, something unexpected surfaced. He began to paint. His great-uncle had been a celebrated artist in Yugoslavia, a man who had built a life around making things that served no practical purpose except to be seen and felt. Raonic had always known this, the way you know things about family history without ever examining them closely. But now, with his racket put away and his body refusing to cooperate, he picked up brushes instead. He spent hours in a way he had never spent hours on a tennis court, not optimizing, not measuring, not calculating, just making. What did he find there that tennis had never given him? That's not a rhetorical question. It matters, because the answer changes how you understand everything that came before. When he finally returned to competitive tennis in the summer of 2023, almost 2 years after the Achilles had given out, he won his first match back. Grass court, the Netherlands. A victory that, by any statistical measure, was minor. A small tournament, a modest field. He wept afterward, not with joy, with relief. The specific relief of a man who had spent over a year wondering if his body would ever agree to cooperate again, and discovered, briefly, provisionally, that it would. The serve was still there. The calculations still ran. The machine still worked. But the body doesn't forgive accumulated debt. It defers it. At the Australian Open the following year, his leg gave out during a match, and he was forced to retire mid-point. At the Canadian Open, his home tournament, the tournament where years earlier he had stood at the net in silence while the replay played on the screen above him, his shoulder locked. He withdrew. He tried once more. And then he stopped. No press conference, no farewell letter, no ceremony. Just the quiet administrative fact of a last match played and no next match scheduled. If you understand that tennis is just the stage for much bigger human battles, for questions about identity and control and what we're actually building when we build a career, subscribe so you don't miss the stories that come next. What Milos Raonic leaves behind is easier to quantify than to understand. He was the first Canadian man to reach a Grand Slam final. Before him, that ceiling existed. After him, Denis Shapovalov reached a Wimbledon semi-final. Felix Auger-Aliassime climbed into the top 5. Canada won the Davis Cup. The door didn't just open, It came off the hinges, and a generation walked through it. His foundation funded prosthetic knees for children who couldn't afford them. He helped build rehabilitation programs for kids learning to move again after injuries, after surgeries, after the kind of physical losses that adults struggle to process and children have no language for yet. A man who spent his career refusing to accept his body's limitations spent his time away from tennis helping children accept and adapt to theirs. The irony doesn't need to be underlined, but here is what stays. The thing that the statistics and the titles and the foundation work don't quite capture. Milos Raonic played professional tennis for over a decade at the highest level, and the evidence suggests he was never primarily motivated by love of the game. He was motivated by the question the game allowed him to answer. How far can deliberate, systematic, relentless effort take a person? The answer, it turns out, is very far. Third in the world. Wimbledon finalist. A name spoken alongside Federer, Djokovic, and Murray in the same breath, in the same era, in the same tournaments. And then the body ended the experiment. What he discovered in the silence afterward, in the painting, in the stillness, in the 14 months without a ball in his hand, is something only he can fully account for. But the rest of us can ask ourselves a version of the same question he was forced to confront. What are you building your life around? And what would be left of you if it were taken away tomorrow? The scoreboard in Montreal said he won that point. Maybe he did. The question is what he was really playing for.